Apart from being plain irritating, they're also associated with disease. Some believe it's because of uncollected garbage. Others say the weather has had an impact. We're joined now by Chris Weldon, Associate Professor of Entomology at the University of Pretoria, to tell us more about this. He is indeed at our Pretoria studios. A very good evening to you, Professor, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's your assessment of the cause behind this?
I actually tend to agree with the people that are saying that it's the weather. Since we had such a warm, dry winter, those conditions are pretty good for fly survival and for their breeding. Flies need warmer temperatures to be able to survive, to lay eggs, to be able to fly and move around, and because of that they also can maintain their numbers through the winter, and then also at the beginning of the summer, there's already a large number there that could potentially then breed and produce the large numbers that we're seeing now.
Now, I will talk about the temperature issue in just a moment, but you say the rains and the hot weather could also have impacted on dung beetles negatively. What's the connection there?
So, dung beetles, they breed in dung, but if you have a really dry season, that creates unfavourable conditions for the dung beetles to survive, and so you have a situation where there aren't so many dung beetles around. That then means that there's an increase in the amount of dung that's available, and that then provides a resource for the flies to actually breed in. Because a lot of the flies that I'm hearing people are seeing, they're house flies and also blowflies. And those flies use dung to breed in. So the females lay their eggs into dung, and then that means that the larvae develop, and then you get a large number of adults that fly around and bother us.
So let's talk about those flies now. You say we may have started the summer with more flies available to breed. What exactly does that mean?
Well, usually over winter, because of the cold temperatures that we see in Johannesburg and also in Pretoria, pretty much all of the Highveld, those cold temperatures really knock the population down. So we start off, we start the summer with fewer flies. But because we had warmer conditions, then that means that we had more flies to begin with.
Now, what do flies typically breed on?
So a lot of the flies that we are seeing, they're closely associated with humans. So they do breed in dung. They can breed in household garbage, meat and food scraps, chicken manure, all those sorts of things. To us, it's disgusting material that we want to throw out, but to a fly it represents a really good resource for the maggots to develop in.
And that's what I want to ask you about. So you've said they're an important part of the ecosystem, and I'm sure they are, but for us, if a fly sits on anything that you're going to put on your mouth, the first thing obviously you must worry about is having laid eggs and the maggots.
Yeah, so they are an important part of the ecosystem. Flies, the adults, are really important in pollination of plants. Flies are actually second most important after bees in terms of pollination. So they are quite important in the ecosystem. And also, while we do think of the maggots developing in this waste as being disgusting, they're helping to recycle nutrients in the environment, and that also helps to break down the amount of waste that is in the environment. But in terms of the health issues, flies actually, the World Health Organization, they recognize that flies can transmit particular diseases, diseases that can cause diarrhea, dysentery and things like that, some skin infections and eye infections. But the chances of picking them up from flies, and for flies mechanically transmitting them from dung and other waste types, it's actually much more likely for us to pick up those diseases from human to human contact, not washing our hands, or eating or drinking contaminated water and food.
Now, I can imagine for some rather sensitive viewers who are watching these visuals and possibly having dinner, we've probably put them off their food, and they're wondering, what tips can you give us to get rid of these flies? Because ultimately, I think a lot of people would want to do that, especially with the infestation. And does it qualify as an infestation, by the way?
We don't really have firm numbers about how many flies there are. There are no long-term studies that have shown whether one season has more than another. At the moment, we're really dealing with anecdotal evidence. But in terms of how to deal with these flies, there are some really key things that you can do. The first thing is to remove the breeding sites. So that involves clearing up any dog poo that's in your garden, or picking up after your dog in parks. If you have chickens, making sure that you take care of their waste as well, because that represents a really strong attractive source for the flies. Also, if you have flies in your yard, you can put up traps. So you can buy those from just from hardware stores or from supermarkets, and they're quite effective at reducing the number of flies in your garden. And if they are coming into your house, fly screens on windows and doors are one of the really classic ways to stop them from getting into the house and coming into contact with your food. But also, if they are in the house, then covering your food, keeping it in sealed containers, that sort of thing. And also as well, making sure that your garbage bin is properly sealed.
Okay, now
so
I need to ask you this.
They can't get in and breed.
I need to ask you this question, Prof. I don't know what the experience of some Joburgers has been, but the ones that I've experienced, they're somewhat aggressive. So the question is, are pesticides an option? Inside the house, you can use an insecticide, but it's something that I don't like to encourage people to use. I think it's much better to use other types of control methods that minimize the number of flies that are around and also minimize your exposure to them. If you have to, then you could potentially use an insecticide inside the house. But again, there are alternatives. There are those sticky papers that you can hang up in the house, and there's also those bug zappers. Bug zappers can work quite well for blowflies. Those are those metallic blue and green flies. They're not so good for house flies, but they can still be quite effective in the house. Thank you so much for your time and insights, Professor Chris Weldon from the University of Pretoria.